Hi, everyone. Welcome to Keto 65 Biohack. At my 65th birthday, which was October 27th, I weighed 286 and a half pounds, and I decided by 66 I was going to be my ideal weight, which is 155 pounds. So, having tried a million diets just like everybody else and been moderately successful, but obviously not ultimately successful, I decided I needed to do something different. So this time I am biohacking it. And I seem to have gained a little bit more understanding about how to biohack my weight loss beyond just the regular straight keto, because we all know that people start keto, they don't stick with keto because they run into the same problems we do with calorie restriction. We get plateaus, we're starving, we're hungry, we can't make it, it's too challenging of a meal prep. How do we do it? Well, that's because we need to do more than just eat keto. There's a lot more to do, but it's not harder. It's actually interesting and doable. Let me show you what I'm doing to biohack. Not just starve, not just substitute another diet. Join me. All right, let me start with how I'm approaching this. So first, I looked at weight versus GKI, glucose ketone index. That is the ratio of glucose to ketones. That changes in the beginning. When you start a diet like this, you're primarily metabolizing glucose. After a while, if you're not giving it carbohydrates or a fuel, a glucose fuel, and you're only giving it something that will essentially use the ketone metabolism, that ratio of glucose to ketone changes. So it might have been this big before, and over time it becomes like this. Okay? And so you can see here in about 18 days, about 39 days, I've lost almost 19 pounds. I'm averaging 12 total carbs a day and 716 calories. Oh my God, you're starving. Actually, I'm not very hungry at this stage, but let me dig into that biohack and why that is. All right, so when I started the diet, I planned a straight line from 286 to 155 in 365 days. I adjusted it here because we all know that first week you lose a lot of weight. If you stay on that line, you're going to mess yourself up. So after I went into ketosis, I readjusted the line to be more clear and more honest, actually, for a ketogenic metabolism. This is my weight loss. Looks kind of interesting. You can see a couple plateaus here, one here. This is a long one here, starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days. All right. The yellow triangles, whenever you see them on my graph, they're fast days. The first thing I had decided to do was to biohack this with fast, to keep those plateaus at bay. Didn't work. Well, or did it? It kind of did. And by that, I mean what I discovered was, for at least right now, for the biohack to work, to get out of a plateau, I have to have a 2-day fast. A 1-day fast does affect something. What does it affect, you ask? All right. So here's my GKI. Now notice in my GKI, as it goes down, every time I do a fast, my GKI does drop. There's frequently a slight rebound, but if you look at these numbers, by the way, this is a log scale, so it's very sensitive, right? So the numbers are really right around 1 and 2, and so the change is minimal. That's why I plotted it on a log scale, so you could see the difference. But for the real numbers, they're much smaller. But you needed to see what the effect was, and we couldn't do that on a linear scale. So you can see whenever I fast, with a rare exception, it drops down. But if I want to fast 2 days, notice I do fast 2 days, and that seemed here to kick the weight off the plateau, but didn't seem to do much for the GKI. The GKI, remember, that's a metabolic switch that has to happen, where the body is always trying to maintain homeostasis. It always wants to balance. Imagine if your body was super reactive, right? As can happen in some disease states where you eat carbohydrates and your glucose goes off the charts. You'd be in a bad state. Or you didn't eat carbohydrates and your glucose plummeted. You'd again be off the charts. So there is a balance that the body is trying hard to strike. So with a 2-day fast, it really didn't change much in the GKI, but it did cause this plateau to become unstuck and move down. Now, whenever I've seen a 2-day fast, I did see a decrease, and of course lose weight. This area here, look at it with a bit of a jaundiced eye, and by that I mean this is when I am still in a glucose metabolic state. So in a large point, you may want to take this part of the curve, your curve, if you're doing this, and analyze it differently than this part of the curve. So let's continue and see what happened as I go along when I look at my other correlations. Before I leave this, what I do want to point out is something called correlations, mathematical correlation. If X happens and Y happens, they're correlated. That doesn't mean they're caused, right? It's not causation, and I may do a little video on correlation versus causation. It just, correlations mean that we see them together. A positive correlation means you see them together and they're doing the same thing. In this case, my weight is decreasing, and my GKI is decreasing. They're both decreasing in the same way. They're correlated. Now, what you see here, a negative correlation, what does that mean? Negative correlations are not bad. It means the opposite is happening. It means, for instance, when your ketones go up, your weight goes down. That would mean they're going in opposite direction, so that's a negative correlation. Why is weight 1? 1 is the absolute correlation. That means when weight changes, right? They're correlated. So what we see here is glucose is correlated positively with weight change. But what's even higher correlated? The highest correlations for weight change that I have found so far, and I've looked at 50 parameters. I'm going to show you them at the end of this. The highest correlation is with ketones, and it's negative. The highest positive correlation is GKI, and the next highest correlation is glucose. Let's take a look at that. Weight versus glucose. Here we see again the same weight that you just saw earlier plus the fast. And here you see the standard line that I'm trying to stay below in order to stay on my target to hit 155. Although I am getting down here into a bit of a nail biter. But I believe in biohacks. All right, here I'm looking at glucose. And again, what are the effects of fasting on glucose? So I'm going along, and remember, here you can again see the changes in metabolism that are going on. As I'm not giving my body carbohydrates, by the way, I convert right around the 6th or so into primarily ketone metabolism. You can see in the early part of the diet, when I am in glucose metabolism, there are these big wide swings, and I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. But you can see these big wide swings. But whenever I do keto, here you can see a fast and it drops. Now here it's fast and it goes up. It's very odd. And again, I'm in glucose metabolism. What I'm suspecting is happening here is that the glycogen that is stored in my liver at this point is being signaled by the fast to release itself. And really, this is a liver glycogen release. You release glycogen, and glucose is what you're picking up because it gets metabolized that way. All right, so let's look at the correlation between glucose. We can see that the glucose is going down. It's not a straight line. And in fact, the more and more we get into ketosis, which happens around here, you can see the glucose straight line would slightly flatten out, right? The slope is going to change around here. So the glucose metabolism correlation does seem to be slowing down here, right? Because it's not being metabolized as much. And it's not being metabolized as much because it's not in abundance. But nonetheless, there is still some moderate glucose correlation with the weight loss. Even when I'm in ketosis, that's an important thing to know. Even when you're in ketosis, there's moderate glucose correlation. Let's take a look now at the glucose versus ketone correlation. Here's the same graph you saw a moment ago. What I wanted to point out to you is at the beginning, remember again, I went into ketosis right around here. Look in the beginning when I'm still in glucose metabolism. I'm having the wide swings, but I also want you to see these dotted lines. For the dotted lines, anything between 100 and about 125 is the pre-diabetic stage. Normal stage is anything under 100 in terms of diabetic stages. So you can see here, while I was in glucose metabolism primarily, most of my time I spent in a pre-diabetic stage. and yet also I topped up this. Once you get above here, you're in a confirmed diabetic phase. So there were a couple periods, boom, where I did pop up over this line. So in any case, the diet has already shown what? Well, it's already shown that I was in a very clear pre-diabetic phase, popping up occasionally to the diabetic phase, but around the 6th, when I converted to the keto stage, I am now most of the time in a normal range. And the longer I stay on this and the more weight I lose, I predict that I will stay in this range. All right, so now we've taken a look at the glucose. What about the ketones? Well, whoa, check it out. Here we can see, of course, in the beginning, there are hardly any ketones, right? And yet, again, as I start to convert, boom, here's a fast, and the glucose went down in the blood glucose, and the ketones started to go up. And indeed, the longer I stayed on a low carbohydrate diet, the ketones went up. Now, this, by the way, is not a log phase, so you can see these numbers are pretty small. So remember in the previous graph where I showed you GKI? The GKI is the ratio of the glucose to the ketones. And you can just, doing the leukometric, you can see that the ratio between the glucose and the ketones is changing quite a lot. The glucose is going down to pre-diabetic levels. The ketones are going up. And so my GKI is changing as well. It's going down. And that is what's accounting for the correlation. But remember the correlation for the ketones? Well, maybe you don't, so let me refresh your memory. Ketones have a strong negative correlation, a stronger negative correlation than the glucose and the GKI have a positive correlation, which means as the ketones go up, the weight goes down. That makes it a negative correlation. Now, we've got a lot of super brainiacs out there on the internet who are going to say probably the difference between the GKI and the ketones is not significant in terms of that they're probably very closely correlated with weight loss. And I probably wouldn't take up that battle. You're probably right if that's what you're thinking. But in any case, one is negatively correlated, one is positively correlated. But we can see that glucose and ketones and their combination, GKI, are all correlated with weight loss. All right, what about weight, carbohydrates, total, and net? Let's talk a little bit about the battle of carbohydrates, total versus net. I had started the diet using entirely total. Now I track both total and net. And here's why. What we're looking at here is the net carbohydrates at the purple. And when we do the total on top of it, makes sense, right? The purple should be less than the total. But because my net and total, it looks like I'm primarily eating carbohydrates with this one exception here. And I can tell you that I happen to know this is some keto bread I made where the total carbohydrate was higher than the net carbohydrate. That ratio was different, but pretty much you can see the ratio for total and net are very similar here. So what about our correlation? When I look at carbohydrates net versus carbohydrates total, and I have about a 2.6, the correlation is negligible to weight loss. Here's where it becomes important. This is correlation, not causation, because you're immediately going to say what I first said was, wait, lower carbohydrates affects my ketones and my ketones affects my weight. Why is the correlation not there for carbohydrates? It's not there for carbohydrates because actually I'm not changing my carbohydrates very much. I'm keeping them very low, really averaging under 10, although there are times it comes above. But you can see here, remember on slide 3 or whatever, I say my average is around 8 or 9. So you can see here, it is running around that amount. So because my ketones my carbohydrates don't change very much, it was very difficult to come up with a correlation for that. So what we're not saying is low ketones, low carbohydrates don't cause weight loss. I'm not talking about cause, I'm talking about correlations. What this says to me is at the very low carbohydrates that I'm running on average, that I'm not seeing a significant effect on weight loss, a significant correlation on weight loss. Now, an experiment to do, I'm not going to do it, is to raise my carbohydrates and would do an experiment over time, say 30 carbs, 20 carbs, 10 carbs, and look at weight loss and do that correlation. But that would put me out of ketosis, so I'm not going to be doing that experiment. Okay, too deep of a dive into correlations. These are the things that I'm running correlations on. So I mentioned I have about 50 parameters. They're not even all here because what I'm pulling in is, of course, calorie counting, carb counting, net carbs counting, activity counting. I use an Oura Ring for a variety of other metrics that have to do with readiness, sleep, and so forth. And I have a couple of those fancy scales that measures a bunch of other weight and mass parameters. And finally, I have a continuous glucose monitor that I also wear in order to see if I can correlate any of that data. What I want you to notice here is a couple of what is correlating very high and moderate. All right, so first off, you can see all these ones. Again, it's, readiness is going to correlate with readiness. Let's go here to weight. Weight is 1, weight, right? So everything that you can see as a 1 is correlating with itself and should be 1. But let's look at the other greens that are not on the outside. These are the things that are correlating high. So for instance, total sleep score is correlating very high with sleep score. All right, so I'm particularly interested for Keto 65 for weight. So let's look at weight. These are the things here that correlate with weight, low, medium, high. and we get over here. We're also going to come down here for weight. This is very much what you just saw in the previous, where the weight correlation is 0.8, 0.5, and 0.7, and that's going to be GKI, glucose, and ketones. But what else does weight loss correlate with? So I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive on the next slide, but I wanted you to see this because you can biohack a number of other elements in order to see what your body is doing as you're losing weight, trying to understand those plateaus, trying to keep it moving. Let's take a look. Okay, so let's look at some of the other correlations, both positive and negative. So what I've seen before is that what correlated with weight was GKI, then from the previous massive correlation, sleep balance, glucose, average resting heart rate. For a negative correlation, and remember, negative isn't bad, it just means they're going in the opposite directions, was ketones, training volume score, and heart rate variability balance score. Let's do a deeper dive on those to see how they can help me understand and lose my weight and optimize it. So here for the weight versus GKI, we just saw that. We see a positive correlation, a decrease in weight. We see also a decrease in GKI. We already talked about that. And it's a pretty high correlation. Now for the sleep balance score, which I'm showing here, you can see a decrease in weight and sleep balance is also decreasing. So that seems to have a positive effect. Now I need to understand what these up and downs were. Are these good things or not? Do they correlate with anything? And when I look here again, you can see right around here where my pointer is, this is about the place where I went into ketosis. So in this first part of this graph, where I'm seeing some of these larger swings, that's glucose metabolism. When I look around here, that's ketone metabolism. So we can see when I went into ketosis, just like my glucose went lower, so is my sleep balance score with a few upticks here. I've also noticed here for my sleep balance, when I have this longish plateau here, my sleep balance is plateaued. And a question I'm asking myself is, you'll notice right when I went into this plateau, which I'm calling the start here, I had this ramp up of sleep balance. Had a bit of a ramp up plateau here, and then it dropped down. So is there something in this sleep balance that can help me manage either the plateaus or be a predictor? So when I see this in the future, when I'm plotting the sleep balance, do I put in a fast here? So if my sleep balance is plateaued, do I put in 2 days of a fast so that I don't get into these others? So now I'm asking myself, is sleep balance score the first metric to add to glucose and ketones and GKI? Well, let's look at sleep balance. It ranges from 0 to 100. It's an overall measurement of how well I slept. It's a weighted sum of sleep contributors. So this is REM, deep sleep, light sleep, all of those things. A score of 85 usually means that all contributors are in balance, and that you meet the typical sleep for your age. So for mine, the sleep balance would be age adjusted. But you can see here, if at 85 I'm in balance, look, I am pretty much not in balance. In the beginning here, I seemed to be more in balance in the glucose metabolic range. But once I got into ketosis, my sleep balance score seems to have gone down. Interesting. And it did bump up here to be a little higher Now, I will tell you that in my personal notes, just from a logging, that I can feel when I sleep well. So these are, in fact, when I have managed to get these scores, I'm sleeping well. So I need to biohack this sleep thing because it seems to have a correlation to weight. The next thing, of course, is the weight versus average resting heart rate. Now, this is a low correlation, so I'm going to be aware of it, and I'm going to be thinking about it and tweaking it, but it's not going to be a super focus. What is the average resting heart rate? So the resting heart rate's the number of times your heart beats in a minute. It's a good measurement of your sleep quality. Oh, so that's interesting. So we already talked about how there seem to be some sleep quality changes here versus here. The Oura measures your heart rate throughout the night and gives you the lowest 10-minute average. Normal heart rates are 40 to 100. So I am in that range, but I am on the higher side, maybe around 85. But it's also a factor of other things like physical activity, nutrition, body position, and environment. A low resting heart rate is associated with a good fitness. So what I like about this was originally, you can see again when I went into ketosis right around here, my heart rate did start to go down. And that was a good thing. So we see a slope. You can imagine a slope here as it's going down. And then right around here, it started to bounce around some. Very much like around here where my sleep balance bounced around some. And we see some with my GKI bouncing around some. So we need to figure out how these are correlated. What is happening here? What's affected the sleep here? Now, I will say here and here I got a new puppy. So sleep is a little bit disturbed, but before that, I don't have a good explanation. So I need to biohack. These are the targets for my biohack. Let me move on and look at the weight versus ketones. Here you can see the negative correlation, and I put in these slope lines to make it more easy to visualize. As the weight goes down, ketones go up. So that is a negative correlation and the strongest correlation with weight that I have found. But let's look at training volume score. Weight goes down. My training volume had increased during this lovely period of slopish down. And it continued to do that. And right around here, my the heart rate variability started to go up. Now, heart rate variability, this is different than heart rate variability versus heart rate balance score. So the heart rate variability balance is an overall balance of your autonomic nervous system. That's the one that's reactive, fight or flight. So it's it's a big picture of that. And it grabs the negative effects of like longer stressors, like physical stressors, illness, any kind of body stress, but also it'll put in the positive impacts like recovery capacity, is the fitness improving. So in a way, it's kind of a GKI. So the heart rate variability is a little bit of a GKI picture for how you're doing because it combines a bunch of things, both stress and readiness, how you're improving. The balance reflects how your day-to-day patterns of stress and recovery balance out over weeks. If your balance leans more towards strain than recovery, it's likely to trend down. So mine here, you can see in the beginning, till we get about here, my balance seemed to trend more toward recovery. And then right around here, my balance tended to trend more toward not toward recovery. And we see that here. So many cool markers, right? So we see the sleep balance score, the resting heart rate score, and now the heart rate variability. Let's take a look at the weight versus training volume score. What does that mean? Training volume measures the amount of medium to high intensity activity over 7 days. Quite frankly, at this weight, I'm not doing anything high intensity. Just going up the stairs is high intensity for me. So this must be grabbing that kind of movement. I'm not like, I can't do that. It would be bad for my joints, bad for my heart, bad for just about everything right now. But that doesn't mean I can't do my version of high intensity. So this is an aspect of maintaining and improving fitness. And so essentially in the beginning, right when I was going into ketosis, you can see my activity kind of dropped. I was hungry. I was a little tired because I was not yet into ketosis. Then, bam, ketosis happens right around here, and the training increases, and the training volume scores increases. And again, right around here, the training volume scores start to drop off. So this is where I'm going to conclude with a question rather than an answer. And the question is, how are these all correlated? And how can I use these for my biohacks? I'm leaning toward the sleep being much more critical than I thought before. On the days that I made myself go to bed at a specific time, the Oura Ring will tell you. Like for me, I tend to go to bed at 9:30, wake up at 4 in the morning. That seems to be my normal pattern. But if I'm excited about the videos, I'll stay up till 10 or 11, but my body still says get up at 4. So I think that could be part of it, the forcing to shut it down at the right hour. Also, for me, I've noticed with the heart rate variability, I have to stop eating no matter what, no later than 6 or 7. Otherwise, the heart rate variability goes in the wrong direction. So if I'm staying up later, I'm probably nibbling too, even though it is on a ketogenic diet. So shouldn't eat after 7 o'clock. Need to go to bed by 9 o'clock. Those are the two things. Need to pay attention to moving more now. I mentioned I did get a puppy a couple of days ago. So the puppy is helping me move more. So I would imagine next week my training volume scores will go up, as will the heart rate balance, because it's an overall thing. So what am I hacking this week? I'm hacking sleep. Go to bed by 9 o'clock. Stop eating by 7 at the latest. Be attentive to my movement. And I've shown you in the past, and I think you probably can't see it, but I have a desk treadmill. And use it more. All right, so this is what I'm hacking. For the sleep, it's more than go to bed early. I'm going to be adding some things like potassium and other stuff, and see if that helps my sleep. I'm not doing any sleeping pills or anything like that. That's going to mess everything up. But there are some things like chamomile tea. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. And just as a reminder, I am not a physician. I'm not giving you advice. I'm just telling you what I'm doing to hack my weight. This is Keto 65, signing on.